Hello and welcome to the Game Changers podcast, where you'll hear from trailblazing, fearless women in sport. I'm Sue Anstis, a founding trustee of the Women's Sport Trust charity and the founder and CEO of Promote PR, one of Britain's leading sports PR agencies. In this episode, you'll hear from the legend that is Denise Lewis Obe. The nation's much-loved Olympic gold medalist turned popular sports commentator, Denise was also a Strictly Come Dancing finalist and is now president of the Commonwealth Games Federation. I went to meet Denise at the beautiful Stoke Park Country Club, where we settled down for a frank conversation about the highs and lows in her incredible career. I started by asking her if she could take me back to the moment when she first realised she was great at sport.
Goodness, I mean, there are points with that throughout your career where you kind of think that was the moment. But I think it was definitely the English schools for me. You know, great competition for school children nationally. And when I qualified for that, I realised that actually, not only do I love the sport more than I thought I did, that I was prepared to sort of go the extra mile, pit myself against, other talented or the best in the country. And I think for me, that was the moment I said, yeah, I'm good.
And how old were you there?
13.
About 13.
13.
Excellent. No, it's good to know. And what was it about athletics you think that was so appealing to you at the time versus other sports? I've seen you were obviously fantastic netball on the the World Cup Comet Relief Games, and netball could have been an option. What was it about athletics that drew you to the sport?
I was dancing as well at the time. So I was doing some ballet, tap modern, I was taking exams, and so I was really quite serious about my grades for dancing. But again, you get to that age, and it is a crunch time for a lot of young people, that 13 to 15 age group where you are hopefully doing a lot of sports, and then you have to start narrowing it down. And, for me, it was just, there's a sense of freedom. I was almost always challenging myself with the individual sports. I liked the camaraderie, the variety of the sports, and the events, and just the energy. Athletics has a great energy to it. Now, whether you're watching, under 12s, under 14s, or world-class international athletics, there's something about athletics that is just makes you gravitate to it. Something that I wasn't getting from dancing.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and so the rest is history. But, your first question about the moment, you keep having those moments when you're asking yourself, are you good enough? And so for me at that time, it was, I'm probably one of the best in the country at what I'm doing at the moment. But then you move throughout your career, and I remember the juniors phase, so that's anything under 20s, under 21s, where I was all right. I was making teams, I was competing, I was the best in the country, but I wasn't sure whether I had what it took on the global stage at my age, for my age group. But slowly and surely, things started to come together.
And when was it heptathlon? When did that become the option rather than individual?
I think I joke to everyone about the fact that I used to do. I mean, I was such a club athlete. I would go every Saturday. Someone would drop out.
Yeah.
The phone call that so and so isn't going to make it for the shot or the discus or the jab, and it was like, Denise, can you do it? And I'd take part and I'd do it. I'd do the relay. I'd do 4x4. You name it. I was involved. And my coach at the time said to me, "Why don't you do heptathlon?"
Right, yeah.
Now, Daley Thompson was one of my, heroes at the time. I was very much aware of Mary Peters. The penny didn't drop to me that I was going to do heptathlon. And so until I did the competition and thoroughly enjoyed it, I loved it. And that was it.
Yeah.
Heptathlon all the way from that point.
And do you look back to it and think, actually, you could have gone, would life have been different if you'd just done a long jump or a javelin or one element of that?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard to say. I loved long jumping. That was the one, even in heptathlon, if it didn't go well, that would hurt the heart. And so you never know. I mean, you just don't know.
Yeah,
you don't know.
On previous podcast interviews, there's many women and women that I talk to in sport who talk about you as being the inspiration for them as they've come through sport. How does that make you feel to know that you've inspired so many future athletes in a range of different sports?
Well, it's a great honour, to feel that you have just sparked something in another individual. And a lot of those women that you mentioned, I wouldn't have known at the time, but that it gave them impetus to say, you know what, I'm going to keep plugging away at what I'm doing, because that's all you've got to do. Everyone asks me if there is some magic about getting to the top, and it isn't. It's about bloody hard work. It's hard work, having that inspiration, someone telling you, and recognition, I think, is really important to keep you in the game.
Recognition from others, from coaches and family.
Coaches, family, ticking your boxes, goal setting and having, marks for yourself achieved, And so once someone's saying, I've watched you, you're doing really well, I think you could be great. I think it's important.
Yeah, I think we forget the power of that feedback and just those one or two comments that can make a massive difference to somebody on that path.
Oh, completely. And, we have spoken a lot, and we do talk a lot about, female, I don't know whether role models is the right word, but female sportswomen that can inspire, that give you the courage to say that you're actually going to shelve whatever else you're thinking and pursue a life in sports. And so, as you said, if I have been that person to a few athletes, then I feel that's my job done, and that mantle and that baton is carried on, from the other sportswomen that we have, such wonderful sportswomen now.
Excellent. And you mentioned Mary Peters. Are there other female role models or female athletes that had profile as you were growing up in those teenage years that you can remember?
Yeah, I mean, whether our listeners will know the names like Sonia Lanneman.
They're all quite old, the listeners.
They're not old. You've got to have local heroes. And I had Tessa Sanderson from my hometown, who was winning Olympic gold in 1984. 1984, it was 1984. Yes, it was. We've had...
was Tessa local to you?
Yes.
Okay. From Birch.
Well, she was at Wolverhampton and Bilston as well, which is where I started before I progressed onto Birchfield. Sonia Lanneman was an amazing sprinter of her time. Young, I think she was one of the youngest to make the Olympics way back when. And so these women I could actually see, I could touch, especially Sonia. She was on the track, week in, week out, unless she was on, national duty.
That's the thing,
Cook.
isn't it? So they're with you. They're actually with you at the athletic stadium. You're seeing them. I guess athletics does give you that in a way perhaps other sports don't, but their club nights are the same in many cases and they're with you.
They've been the same since I was a child. They are the same now. Tuesdays and Thursdays, Sunday mornings, the club nights. And I think that was important. And, you see some athletes with their GB vests. So when I moved to Birchfield, a bigger club, still in the region, you had Derek Redmond training, like Phil Brown, a lot of brilliant athletes. And you think, okay, I see that I'm in the right environment, I'm in the right place, I know I'm going to get good coaching, and, the rest is up to me. And so I love that. And I think we've lost a little bit of that these days in athletics for sure. And you highlighted other sports. My son's involved in football and he's part of the academy system. And they don't get to see the first team, They're sort of ushered away, they train on different nights or early in the morning. And never the twain meet. And so I don't know whether I agree with that, but, for me it was very much different, and that really kept me in the game.
Excellent. It's a bit of a standing joke in my family that you're on television once, and I said, I used to train with Denise Lewis, and it's since been pointed out I kind of jogged along as part of the warm-up at the Alexander Stadium when I was working there in the 1990s. So taking you back, so as I say, it's a bit of a family joke whenever you're there, they laugh at me again, but taking you back to that time, obviously, and looking through your story, it was a massive journey that you used to take, sort of 3-hour round trip, bus and train to get there to train from the age of 13. What was it at the time? What were your goals? You were so committed for one so young to be so committed to sport. What do you think was your driver then?
I don't know really. I I look at my family setup, and I'm an only child of a single parent mom, and she worked so hard, and my grandmother. They're all very hard workers, and so I think there was just something in me anyway that if you're going to do something, you're going to try and do it well, and if it's something you enjoyed. And I knew my mom, she liked me doing athletics, but she wasn't sold on the level of commitment that I was putting in. But there was trust there. And so she trusted that I was making that journey because I was passionate, and she never held me back, which I think was very important.
Very brave of her.
Because I probably wouldn't do it with my kids now. But I think it was just that desire within me to be better than, I guess, my environment. There was having that passion, that commitment to something. I didn't know whether it would lead to any greatness, but there was just that commitment. And maybe it's just my personality. You try and find what were the drivers, but there was just something in me which was very self-determined and committed. And it's not till now that I look back, or the last few years where I've looked back at, when I'm raising my own children, and I'm kind of saying, come on, let's go. Have you packed your bag? Are you ready? Why are you not by the door waiting?
Yeah. And you were.
My mum didn't have to do any of that.
Interesting.
I was just there. And she couldn't mobilise me because she didn't drive. Yeah. So I did have to take the train and the bus and what have you, because I knew that led to better coaching. And so that's what I did.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was going to ask you about whether we talk a lot about teenage girls dropping out at 13, 14, which seems a time that you were so committed. But did you feel you were missing out on teenager life, or did you have any wobbles at all?
No, and I didn't have any wobbles because I like to think I'm a person of balance. And even at that age, I knew it was important for me to still be a teenager. Yeah. So I did pack the odd little lycra skirt in the bag my mum might not have known about. I might have deviated from, the bus that I was supposed to take home and go for a quick, beverage with my friends. I might have done that.
You were human.
Yeah, I'm human. But it was never to the detriment of the next day I'm going to be at the track. Yeah. So if there was a Saturday evening I was going out, I'd be at training on Sunday. And so I didn't worry about that. And my friends were very supportive at the time. They were like, oh, you probably won't be able to make it, will you? But if you can. Yeah. And sometimes I did, but I was always training.
Yeah, excellent. Oh, it's good. It's good to hear. I'll pass it on to my teenage daughters. And obviously you've certainly had your fair share of injuries across the years in training, and right up to the day you won gold in Sydney as well. And most of us aren't athletes, but I guess we've all had those times when you feel a bit powerless and you can't move things forward. So I'm interested to know how you dealt with those times when you work so hard and then you're unable to bring that to fruition and to compete. How did that feel?
It's part of, and I'm going to sound like I'm some wise old person, but I'm not. It was just always about knowing things are going to go wrong. Doesn't matter what you're doing, how great you are at your job, you're going to have moments where you're going to face problems. And athletics is no different. You're going to be injured. And you're right, I had my fair share of injuries. But I always try to be smart or listen to the experts and not try and test the foot that's supposed to be rested, which we all do it. But, I've non-weight bearing meant non-weight bearing. And I have a great patience. And so I think, I just used to try and focus on the things that I could do and not what I couldn't do. And that definitely got me through Sydney because it was such a horrendous time. Timing was lousy. The injury was just, I didn't foresee it at all. But through patience and persistent practice of the things that I could do, and obviously a meeting of time, because there was a point where maybe if Sydney was a one more week, I wouldn't have got the results I got. Yeah. It was a race against time. But doing the things in the sort of the 6 to 8 weeks leading up to that, where I was totally non-weight bearing, without the sophistication of the medical support that they have now.
It's just,
it was very raw, and And I got through it. So that's how I faced most of the injuries. You know, there were sometimes, I remember one year, 1999, going into the World Championships, I didn't do a heptathlon at all before the Worlds. You know, it was just picking. I had surgery in May and little bits were just going wrong. But mental focus and mental toughness has, I think, always been my greatest strength.
I was going to say, you've always had that. Do you think that has evolved over time, or were you always looking for that bigger picture? You knew like a longer term goal to get there?
Yeah, I think that, in essence, is perhaps when you talk about the 13-year-old girl moving to the 28-year-old young woman to the 46-year-old mother of four, that's how I operate. Yeah. I try to have that overarching vision, plan, of how to get my children through the education phase, to navigate the pitfalls of being an adolescent and teenager through to adulthood. I talk about it all the time. And I'm trying to be as flexible as I can so that I don't drive them nuts, but that overarching thought process is what I think I'm good at.
Yes, good at lots of things.
I don't know about that, but I try. And, I try not to beat myself up too much. You know, I hear a lot of athletes, particularly talking about, depression and, their mental wellness. I haven't experienced that really. Only, I would say, a tinge of it when I retired.
Yeah.
But I was able to focus a bit more outwards than drowning inwards.
I was going to ask you about that. I come on to talk a little bit about, you've mentioned Sydney there, and we talk a lot about athletes transitioning out of sport and that massive struggle. So what was it you think then that helped you when you say focusing outwards? What were your goals as you came off the back of Sydney, as it were, really, or retiring, 4 years on as an athlete?
Yes, it was. I mean, there was a couple of setbacks that led up to the retirement and bereavement. My grandmother passed away. My coach was moving on. There were so many things that were not going well, and I didn't have the energy or the mental energy at that point. And I thought, it's time. My body's saying it's time. My mind's saying it's time. I was down in my confidence. I had no clarity at that point, but I tried to focus outwards and not drown in those feelings too much, and writing things down. Just what would I like to do? What do you think you're good at?
Did you have any help and assistance in that? Was it?
No.
It's interesting now, isn't it, with the EIS and the lifestyle advisors?
Absolutely.
And it's fantastic for athletes that they do have that support. But looking, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. But there wasn't that support there is now.
That support. And, I remember walking away almost as a whisper, from a sport that I'd been involved in for so many years. And there was no fanfare, there was no celebration, and there was no one to talk to.
Yeah.
Very sad time. And I do look at that with a bit of regret, because it shouldn't have been like that.
Yeah.
No one who serves the country for as long as I think athletes do, and I certainly did, at the highest level, should have to face that. But I did. And luckily I came through it relatively unscathed. And I think reaching out was important. And the person I reached out to, one of the first people I reached out to, was Sue Campbell.
Yeah, oh wow.
Baroness.
Yeah.
Legend of all legends. Champion of women's sport. You know Sue so well. And, I spoke to her and she was like, come on board.
Was she at the Youth Sport Trust at the time?
Youth Sport Trust at the time.
Yeah.
And so
fantastic.
That was sort of like a little lifeline for me. But also timing, the London 2012 was in its conception and we were talking about that, and Seb Coe rang me and asked me to be part of the presentation team in 2005. So again, that gave me, one of my childhood heroes has actually picked the phone up. How did he get my number? And that gave me a bit of a boost.
Yeah.
A bit of a boost.
If I could just take you back to Sydney, I feel I jumped across to
No, that was me. I was flown everywhere.
But going back to Sydney, because I think it's just such an important part of your history, and for people, athletes looking and progressing now, the kind of future of. So going back to that time and in the athletes' village, as you sit down and you talk with the children, can you remember what it felt like, that atmosphere in the athletes' village ahead of your competing in those days?
The village is just immense. It's amazing. It's huge. But by the time I'd come around to Sydney, I'd already had, games time experience. So I was in Atlanta 4 years before. Yeah. So I knew how to conduct myself. I felt confident enough to sort of own my little space. Whereas in contrast to Atlanta, I was literally felt like I was looking up at everything, in awe of everything, everyone, the vastness of the facilities, the how many people that are descending on the Olympic Village. And so by Sydney, my focus was very different. I was in the moment because I knew I'd faced the weeks of injury and the weeks of uncertainty. And so for me, it was very much business.
Yeah. And did you go in? Did you know you could win? I mean, that's, any athlete knows that. But going in before it, were you with the mindset that you were going to achieve gold?
No, I wasn't going in with the mindset that I was going to achieve gold. Because I had so much uncertainty about whether my Achilles tendon would hold up. Yeah.
And the injury in your foot, you didn't even know about.
The injury that then transpired, in the penultimate events. There were so many questions that hadn't been answered when I got into the arena, but my mind was almost steady. It wasn't flitting, it wasn't panicking, it was calm, and it was businesslike. Yeah. And once I'd assessed my room and my space, where I could, and also my warm-up routine, because I had to have a little warm-up in my room before I'd actually get to the track to make sure the Achilles was loose enough in order for me to start my preparation.
I read about that with the hot water in the sink.
Yes.
And
that's right.
Really the basics.
Yeah, that's right. And it was very much, okay, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do to give me a chance. And that's all I wanted, a chance. And the night before I competed, I listened to Whitney Houston and Mariah Carey's duet soundtrack. If you believe, that was all I said. If you believe enough, you can do this.
I love that, the power of music. Be a Game Changers Spotify playlist, don't you, really, for those songs?
That's the next thing. That should be absolutely the power of music at the right time, where it all comes together. It can give you that maybe 1% that you're looking for in a performance, or you're changing your mindset.
Excellent, that's really good. And I guess then moving on, the past such an intense 2 days and all those events too. So again, how do you feel you got through that in terms of dealing with that pressure across those 2 days? I guess it's not something new, is it? That's something you've built up across that time. But is it massively magnified for the Olympic Games beyond other championships?
It's magnified, but I think with experience you learn to handle it. You learn to handle that cauldron of expectation. If you've had World Championship experience or a European experience, multi-sport environment, you need it. Commonwealth Games was important for that as well, the multi-sport environment, which is so unique because it teaches you how to be respectful for the other sports that are competing either before you or after you in particular. And so for me, it was, I would say, I could own the space. So I felt like I belonged. There was already a sense of belonging, and coping with the pressure I'd already rehearsed. I tried to visualize the pitfalls, the potential pitfalls, and how that would make me feel. And so that rehearsal, that constant rehearsing in the mind, which is what your training should be about. Yeah. Your training isn't just physical, it's mental as well. And so by the time I got to those 2 days, I was ready. And even in the arena, you're hearing the roar of your name. The British support is immense. But there is an overwhelming calmness that you have to almost box and own in a bubble. Yeah. And you open the lid to let the energy come in, and you try and keep the lid on for the negatives. and the emotions when things aren't going quite so well. You kind of have to find another release and not let it consume you. And my coach was instrumental to and my team. My team were very instrumental to help manage that. So the physiotherapist, Kevin Lidlow, was just great. So in those moments when it's your downtime, you just talk about something, anything else. It's not about the athletics at that moment. Coach brings you back in the game, back in the room, and but he was also experienced enough to know what to say, when to say it, and how much to say. Because when I'm competing, or when I was competing, and it was at that level, I never used to say much.
It's interesting, isn't it? Moving on to that finishing the 800 and looking up and seeing your name there announced. And again, is that something you relive? Can you take yourself back and remember how it felt at that time?
I can. Even just talking to you now, I feel like I'm, the adrenaline's kind of pumping. Wow. Yeah. Yes, that 800, leading to that 800, as you said, I had another injury that arose, after the long jump, and I couldn't put my foot down. And so that was a race against trying to get me to finish the javelin and the 800 metres. And standing on the line before the gun went, I always felt a bit sick. I'm thinking this is going to be just a long 2 minutes. You can do it. I was already in first position, but I knew that it was on the edge because I hadn't done the work, hadn't done enough running. My opposition was very good at 800 metres. So again, I had to hold on for dear life in that 800 metres. And that's the difference when you're competing, when you're healthy and fresh, you can react. I couldn't. I knew I couldn't. I knew I just had to survive it and pray that my foot didn't break down. But as you said, when I crossed the line, I didn't dare think I would have won. I didn't dare think about winning or hearing the words Olympic gold medalist until I'd seen it on the board, despite this big voice shouting it out, saying, "Denise, you've done it, you've done it." I said, no, don't listen. Don't take it in. Don't believe it until you see it. And I've recently seen, that image of me hearing my name and hearing Olympic champion for the first time, and the wave of relief that washes over you. I looked heavenwards, and it was just wow.
That's amazing. Oh, it's so lovely. I love to hear it still inspires those feelings.
Yeah, it really does.
It's fantastic. And having read your autobiography again and various interviews over the years, it does feel a little bit as if the media, I think, were particularly tough with you. And that you were on this amazing pedestal when you won gold and so much publicity. And then, if your career changed at all like that, beyond the height of your career, they were very quick to criticise you. How do you feel? How was it living under that scrutiny almost when all you were doing was going about the job that you've been doing for the last 10 years, as it were?
It was tough. It was tough because, as you said, you put on this pedestal. When I got back from Sydney, there was not a newspaper that didn't cover the story, my story, my journey, and everything that in between. So for almost a year later to be the villain, it was really...
It's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
It was so weird. And I was angry. Looking back, I was angry, but I wouldn't show it. My mum was always told me, just act with decorum, just be bigger than the situation. And there were times where I felt like I really wanted to lash out at some journalists and I just moved on, but I did internalise it. I did internalise a lot of the negativity, and also at that time I had my daughter as well. So I was under the cosh a bit, because my coach, as I say, I joke about it, but it wasn't funny at the time that Lauren, my daughter, was not part of the performance plan. So he was not happy.
And do you think being a woman made it worse from a media perspective?
I think, as Olympic champion, you've got a title, and so people expect you to perform in the way they want you to perform. You've got to be at the next championships. You've got to be representing, because we weren't getting that many gold medals. There weren't too many gold medals, female gold medals, medalists around at that time.
Yeah.
Definitely not in track and field. And if I stretch my mind back to the other sports,
not massive.
Not massive.
There's a sense of ownership that people wanted you to be that person.
Wanted me to be that person. So to almost let them down by not appearing and not performing and not being at the or not performing at the World Championships was a big letdown. But there was a whole lot of, external things going on
absolutely.
at the time as well. So, and again, no place to go. No place to talk, no support.
Yeah.
You've got to work it out. You've got to make decisions that you feel and think are right for you at that time. And whether or not with hindsight you would have done it differently, at the moment, whilst you're in it, there's always that race against time. Even as a first-time mom, I was always thinking, well, how can I get back?
Yeah.
I'm having my baby, yes, tick that box, yes, I'm loving that. But I know I'm an athlete, first and foremost.
You almost forget, don't you, that the pressure of being a mother for the first time, alongside trying to come back as a global athlete at the same time too, without the network and support that there is in place for athletes now. Yeah,
completely. It was challenging, and that's where you rely on your friends the most, and and just you just get through it. Yeah. I felt I just got through it, barely.
I guess on a slight positive there wasn't social media then, so there wasn't the trolling and whatever that we see now.
Could you imagine? I probably would have gone under, seriously.
Yeah.
Had there been that level of public scrutiny, trolling and interference, because it is interference, I think even the strongest person hasn't got the discipline not to read all that stuff. Yeah, so you take it on board and it upsets you.
And how do you deal with that now in media? And obviously you are still in the big profile now in the media. Do you deal with that differently if there's any negativity, or do you not see that nowadays?
I just brush it off. I'm my life is more than that. Now,
absolutely.
The time you think it's everything, and rightly so, but you do have to learn to push things aside. So even if I have a negative comment, and I don't do a lot of social media, I'm involved, but I'm not immersed on it like some people I know. I just delete.
Yeah.
Just no, I don't need to hear that negatively. Delete. Block.
Yeah.
Move on.
Excellent. That's good.
Swipe left.
Very sound advice.
Swipe left. That's all you do. Just
good advice for children too, isn't it? Absolutely. And do you think working in the BBC and being in the media on the other side has changed the way you think about that and the way in which you deal with athletes when you're now talking to athletes and interviewing athletes?
I feel I have a responsibility. There's twofold. As a broadcaster and a pundit critique, if you like, I'm there to be as honest as I can with the information that I have, to inform, the viewer of what, they're seeing. So analyse. Yeah. But behind closed doors, I feel I have a responsibility to talk and to be a person that the athletes can talk to if they want to. Excellent. And I have reached out to athletes because I said to myself, sometimes people don't ask for help. You have to say, I'm here to help you if you want to. Because you could be waiting a long time, because everyone is proud and no one wants to admit that they need some advice. And so I have reached out to a few athletes and said, look, I'm here and I understand what you're going through. So let's talk about it.
That's good to hear. And you talked a little, you've alluded a couple of times to coaches, and I know you've been very open about the challenges of coaches and changing coaches through your career, and it's incredibly hard to find a coach that would stay with you as you change and the coach changes too. So is there any advice you'd give to young athletes now about finding the right coach? And sometimes I know it's foisted upon you because that's the club that you're at and the coach that you get, but as athletes progress and have a choice, what would you say makes for a good athlete-coach relationship?
That growth, that preparation of being able to grow together. And, I think for a long time, and you see it now, because I think it's the nature of what you do. You're a young athlete, you're looking up to your coach as that all-knowing being, and the coaches aren't.
They're humans.
They're humans. They're just humans. They may have experience, they may not have much experience. But once there's a point where the athlete feels that their voice is not being listened to, the necessary questions need to be asked.
Yeah.
And that should never be a feeling of ownership. That I think in the past, there was that feeling that athletes felt very much that they owed that coach
Right. Yeah.
their life, their career, and that they couldn't move because that person had dedicated so much time to them. It's a two-way process. The coaches want to help, and yes, they do. And there's a whole conversation about coaches, especially in athletics, about the volunteer sector versus paid positions, which would alleviate that somewhat. But the athletes need to have their voice, and that doesn't happen enough. So it's being honest, asking the right questions, and I think the coaches need to understand, and I think they are getting better at how to deal with young people, and not treating them like possessions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. Very interesting. We have a whole other conversation on athletics and coaching and volunteers, couldn't we? Within your life now, you've done some amazing things since you're finished competing, so commentating and presenting TV, and obviously Strictly Come Dancing, second place and so on. I guess what have been the biggest highlights for you? Are there things that really stand out in terms of the amazing things you've got to do since you've finished?
I was so fortunate that I've managed to just to tick things off, not even that they were on my bucket list, but just the right place, the right time, just fun things, from having a life of very single-minded, one track, pardon the pun, just doing the same things, training, eat, sleep, breathe training, to have the variety and options that I've had over the years has been brilliant. So Strictly was one, absolutely.
Amazing,
Rowing the English Channel for Comic Relief with John Bishop.
Course,
That was just insane.
Forgot about that. It's amazing.
It was amazing, but it's probably the hardest thing I've actually done.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't do continuous movement like that. And so to have to concentrate for what it was, I think it was 7 hours, nearly 8 hours of rowing.
Yeah. Wow.
Just wow. Yeah. Really a wow.
But you're not about to go into I'm a Celebrity. We're not going to see you any other plans, any...
I don't have any plans of that nature.
Have you got enough on your life at the moment?
I do.
I was going to say that. It's an incredibly busy life at the moment. Mother of four and new baby Troy in your lives. And you do the media work with the BBC. You've got your commercial work, charities. You sit on boards and so on. So I understand a busy life is hard to switch off. But where do you find the time for yourself? If you have a chance, what do you do that is for you and about you as an individual?
Probably not that much, really, because it is a full-time job, parenting. So I just take little things, even if it's going for a walk with my dog, where I can leave everyone at home, and if I have to take Troy, I take Troy, but generally just listening to some music, because I don't get time to read, because someone's always calling my name, calling my name, Mom this, Mom that, where's this, where's that, are we going yet? So I find holidays are the time when I can do things for myself. And it's going to sound really odd because I can do any sort of training myself. But last year, throughout my pregnancy, I took on a personal trainer just to give me that 1 hour where I could just go off and have that time to exercise. I mean, I could do it at home, but I know I'd be interrupted.
My husband's a personal trainer, so go the personal trainers.
And I think it's
different. I think you commit to it then, don't you? And you know it's your time. Yeah.
Commit to it. It's out my time, and I can just remind myself who I am again.
Yeah. Fantastic. Yes. That's lovely to hear. And you're still president of the Commonwealth Games England.
So that's very exciting.
Yeah, and so exciting. Obviously, your home region coming to Birmingham in 2022. I was going to ask you how you feel about it, and I can see how you feel about it. But I guess what does that mean to you, having won 2 Commonwealth golds, to be in that role, and obviously with 2022 ahead?
I really can't wait. It's a very similar feeling to I had when London was awarded the Olympics. I think the amount of regeneration for the region, and that's, east to west Midlands, it's going to be massive. Great sense of pride, and I'm hoping the legacy for the communities that dwell in Birmingham will last a lifetime. The young people, and also as you said, the communities that are there that will benefit and hopefully really try to benefit from the facilities that will be in place and the job creation for that region. It make me very proud, but also with a tinge of sadness, because the Alexander Stadium that I have known since I was a child won't look the same. No. It won't look the same. There'll be, when they knock that building down, there's the Knowles stand, Nelson stand, main stand. When that comes down, I will shed a tear, because I can plot my sleeping points in that stadium when I used to come back in from school into the stadium, because I was always a little bit early for my training session, and I'd have a little cat nap. I'd have a little snooze on the carpet in the corner like a little cat, and I'll be gone.
Maybe they can auction off some of that carpet.
Maybe they could. It's probably all grotty now. Yeah.
And I know you've done lots of work in the past with the Youth Sport Trust and others to get girls into sport, and we talked about that. But why do you feel sport's so important, particularly, and obviously for boys and girls, but particularly for girls?
For every reason that we know sport does for you. It's, we talk about the health benefits, but just women being able to, I do sport, play sport, whatever guise you're in. It's just that feeling that I know I used to get as a child, as a young woman, being involved in sport, to pit yourself and challenge yourself in a way that is so different to anything else that you're going to do. You've got your academics on one side, but there are moments when you just need to increase the heart rate and feel the sweat. Or if it's not the sweat, it's just thinking about long term. As a woman, you're going to need your health.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are constantly challenged from the age of 12, 13, when you get your first period, through to parenting and motherhood, if you choose to go that route, or to when you hit the menopause, which none of us will avoid.
Let's talk about menopause.
Yes, we won't.
We don't talk about it enough.
We don't talk about it enough, and so I feel that young girls need to be aware that is the path you're going to be on. No matter what other wonderful things you do, your health and your body needs to be prepared for that. And sport is a great vehicle to allow you to cope with the things that are going to be thrown at you throughout the rest of your life.
Fantastic.
And if you want to then take it on to a level that is, international and competitive, brilliant. But if not, it is about just your wellness and being fit for who you are and what you do. And, your aging body, which no one wants to talk about when you're in your 20s, because you're invincible, But it does deteriorate. It happens. It is really life. And so make sure you prepare it well.
Yeah, fantastic. Finally, I had a lovely quote recently that we should measure our success in life on the positive impact we have on other people's lives. And I think you've clearly had a hugely positive impact on lots of people. So how do you measure your success today now in life? Is it different to where you were as a young athlete?
Oh, completely. If it's about parenting, and I have to keep bringing it back, because that's where I am. I've got a daughter about to do A-levels, my son, my second one, he's about to move into another school to prepare for his GCSEs, another one who doesn't know why we have to go to school at all, and then a baby. And so it takes up a lot of my hours. I do believe that imparting knowledge is so important. You can be moved on so much if you're going back to women in sports. Yeah. That our early pioneers have afforded the fantastic sports that we're seeing today, that our women are really competing, winning medals, winning tournaments in every guise. And personally, I'd like to think, as my family has moved on massively since my great-grandmother and my grandmother came over to the UK for the first time, we've keep moving forward, and that's the biggest message I can give. And so when I parent, I just want to move the generations forward in academically, socially, and hopefully they are happy people for the process and the journey.
A massive thank you to Denise for being so generous with her time and so open about the challenges and joys in her life as an athlete, ambassador and mother. It's easy to see why she's had such a huge impact both on and off the track. I'd love to hear what you think about the Game Changers podcast, so please take a moment to leave a review and give us a rating on Apple. It makes a massive difference in helping to reach new audiences. If, like me, you're feeling inspired and moved by Denise's story, please spread the word across your own networks, and why not encourage your family, colleagues and friends to listen to the podcast too. To make sure you don't miss out on future episodes, please subscribe to the Game Changers, and you can find out more about all my guests from Series 1 and 2 at promotepr.com/gamechangers. Next week, I'll be talking to Claire Connor, CBE, former England cricket captain and now Managing Director for women's cricket at the ECB. On Claire's watch, the women's team were awarded professional contracts, and the England women won the World Cup in front of packed stands at Lord's. Claire's a passionate and articulate professional, and I learnt so much in talking with her.
Almost as soon as I was a toddler and I could run around, I was dragging a cricket bat that was far too big for me to do anything with, but I was just really attached to it. And I can remember from a really young age sitting on the doorstep and crying if I wasn't allowed to go to cricket with my dad at the weekend.